The bark was faint at first, almost swallowed by the wind that curled through the branches, but then it sharpened, urgent, raw, like a cry breaking against the silence of the woods. I stopped in my tracks, heart snagging, eyes sweeping upward. And there he was, a dog clinging impossibly to the fork of an old oak tree, paws trembling against the rough bark, chest heaving with terror. His fur was streaked with mud and leaves, his eyes wide and glassy, searching for something, anything that looked like safety. The world around him seemed to hush in reverence for his fear. The air smelled of rain-soaked earth, damp and metallic, and the sound of his claws scraping wood cut through me deeper than any scream. He wasn't just stuck. He was suspended between survival and surrender, caught in a place no creature should ever be. And in that fragile, breathless moment, one question burned through me. How in God's name had he gotten there? And how on earth could I bring him back down? The woods had always been a place of quiet to me, a patchwork of towering oaks and soft undergrowth, where the wind spoke in whispers and the earth carried the damp perfume of moss and pine. That day, the air carried the aftertaste of rain, heavy, metallic, still clinging to the bark of trees and pooling in the hollows of roots. My boots sank into softened soil as I walked, expecting nothing more than the usual solitude of an overcast afternoon. But then, a sound cleaved through the hush. At first, I thought it was the wind pitching strangely, twisting in the canopy above. But no, it was sharper, raw, a bark, a broken one, thin and piercing like a splinter in the skin of silence. I froze, listening. It came again, jagged, fractured, more a cry than a call. My heart stumbled. Dogs barked from yards, from fields, from the safety of ground beneath their paws. But this sound was airborne, suspended, as though it was leaking from the branches themselves. I tilted my head upward, squinting through the lattice of leaves. My eyes roamed over limbs dark with rain, until something caught me, a patch of color that did not belong to bark or leaf. My stomach dropped. He was there, perched impossibly high in the fork of a sprawling oak, a dog with mud-matted fur, legs trembling, eyes wide with an almost human terror. His chest heaved, sides rising and falling like bellows forced to their limit. His paws dug against the bark, claws screeching as though he was clinging to the last grip of life itself. For a moment, disbelief tethered me in place. How could this even be real? Dogs didn't climb trees. They chased squirrels, they dug holes, they bounded across fields. But here was one, clutched like a broken ornament in the crook of branches 20 feet above the earth. And he was not silent. His cries ricocheted through the woods, each one wrapping tighter around my ribs. I stepped closer, my breath snagging in my throat. The ground beneath the oak was a mess of fallen leaves and wet earth, littered with smaller branches that had snapped in storms past. The smell of rain and wood rot clung thick to the air, mingling with the raw scent of panic that seemed to radiate from him. He shifted, trying to steady himself, and for a split second one paw slipped. My chest constricted as he scrambled back, nails carving desperate lines into bark. "Easy," I whispered, though I knew he couldn't understand. My voice shook anyway, as if speaking gently might hold him there a little longer. His ears twitched toward me, eyes finding mine, and in those eyes I saw it, the kind of fear that hollows you out from the inside. Not the surface, level fright of a startled animal, but something deeper, the knowledge of danger. The silent plea of a soul on the edge. The wind picked up, threading through the branches, rattling the leaves with a sound like restless fingers drumming on wood. Each gust made the tree sway, subtle but terrifying with him balanced so precariously. His body tensed with every movement, and I could see the exhaustion in the quiver of his legs. He had been there for hours, maybe longer. Fighting gravity, fighting himself, fighting the inevitability of falling. I circled the base of the oak, craning my neck for some path, some branch low enough to start climbing. But the trunk was tall, smooth, offering nothing but damp bark that would laugh at the grip of human hands. My palms pressed against it anyway, cool and unyielding beneath my skin. I looked up again, feeling that helplessness start to gnaw. He barked once more, shorter this time, weaker. My heart lurched. The world around us seemed to shrink to just this one impossible scene. Me at the roots, him in the branches, the space between a chasm neither of us knew how to cross. I could hear the ticking of my own pulse in my ears, the rasp of my breath clouding in the cool air. Somewhere far off, a crow called, its wings slicing the gray sky. But here, in the orbit of that oak, time felt held hostage. I thought of all the things a dog's body was meant for: sprinting, digging, curling into the warmth of a home. Not this. Not balancing on a branch, suspended like a forgotten toy left in the limbs of childhood. He didn't belong up there any more than I belonged watching, powerless. And yet, this was where fate had placed us both. Me staring up, him staring down, two beings bound together by one desperate need to find a way back to Earth. I pressed a hand to my chest as if I could steady the storm rising there. Every instinct screamed to act, to do something, anything. But the tree loomed taller than my courage, and the distance between us felt wider than air. Still, I couldn't look away. His life was dangling in those branches, trembling, crying, refusing to surrender. And though I had no plan, no ladder, no rope, only my bare hands and a heart thudding with fear, I knew in that instant I could not leave him. Because when you see a creature hanging between survival and surrender, the choice isn't really a choice at all. You stay, you try, you find a way. Even if your voice trembles, even if your hands shake, even if the whole world tells you it's impossible, you find a way. And so, with the dog's cries weaving into the marrow of my bones, I planted my feet in the mud at the base of that tree, tilted my head back to the heavens, and whispered to him, "Hold on." The first minutes after I found him blurred into a haze of frantic calls and useless gestures. My voice, raised in soft coaxing, felt fragile against the wind. "Come down, boy. Easy, easy. Just climb down." The absurdity struck me even as I said it. Dogs don't climb down trees. He only tilted his head, ears twitching, body frozen in a quiver that made his ribs flash with each shallow breath. I tried clapping softly, crouching low, patting the ground like one would to invite a pet back to safety. He didn't move. His eyes stayed locked, not on the earth beneath him, not even on the branches around him, but on me, like I was the only tether he had to hope. And still I could do nothing but stand there, arms open, heart breaking. I circled again, boots sinking into mud, slipping on roots, craning up at angles that made my neck ache. Each attempt at finding a foothold ended the same way, palms against slick bark, fingernails scrabbling at grooves that weren't there, the tree refusing me like a sentinel guarding its prisoner. The oak rose in quiet defiance, its trunk glistening from the earlier rain, as though mocking my desperation. "Damn it," I whispered, striking the trunk once with my fist. The bark bit into my knuckles. The sound was nothing compared to his bark that followed, a cry that cracked halfway, sharp with fear, raw with exhaustion. He shifted again, claws scratching lines into the branch, and for a heartbeat his paw slipped too far. His chest heaved, mine did too. I thought he'd fall. I thought I'd watch him break against the ground. But somehow, impossibly, he found purchase, claws catching on a splinter of bark that held him steady. The relief hit like a wave, but it didn't last. The truth gnawed at me he couldn't hold on forever. His muscles trembled with fatigue. His throat tore itself hoarse with every cry. And I had no rope, no ladder, no way up. Only my bare hands and a sickening helplessness that grew heavier with every second. I leaned my forehead against the tree, wood cold against my skin. Behind me, the wood stretched in indifferent silence, as if the world didn't care that a life was dangling above the earth. The air smelled of rain, of soil turned over and damp, of leaves crushed under boots that had wandered without purpose until fate delivered me here. I thought of how many people had passed these woods in the last hours, how many had walked by without hearing him, without looking up. The idea pressed like a weight. If I hadn't come, would he have simply clung until he slipped? Would his cries have gone unheard, absorbed by branches and wind until silence swallowed them? I looked up again, meeting his eyes. There was a question there, unspoken but sharp. "Why aren't you saving me?" It cut me deeper than any wound could. Because what answer could I give? That I wasn't strong enough, that I didn't know how, that I was terrified too. My silence was an admission, and I hated it. Minutes stretched into something longer, something unbearable. His barks grew less frequent, broken by whines, as though his voice was unraveling under the weight of waiting. Each sound was a plea, each silence a knife twisting deeper. I shouted once, "Hold on." Louder this time, my throat raw. But even that rang hollow. Words could not fill the space between us, could not hold him steady. I tried again to climb. Shoes scraping, hands burning, arms straining as I leapt for the lowest branch and missed. I landed hard, mud splashing my jeans, palms stinging. He barked at the sudden movement, startled, and in his scramble another paw slipped. The sound it made, claws raking bark, a gasp in his throat, sent panic like fire through me. I stood chest heaving, tears burning hot against my eyes. My body shook not from effort, but from rage. Rage at myself, at the tree, at the impossible absurdity of it all. How could something so ridiculous, so unbelievable, feel so crushing? A dog in a joke. Yet here, it was life or death, and I was failing. The helplessness grew heavy, pressing into my lungs until every breath felt short. My mind raced through absurd plans. Stack rocks, find fallen branches to make a ladder, climb another tree nearby and leap across. Each idea collapsed under its own weight, reality cutting through the fog of desperation. I was one person, and gravity was merciless. The woods seemed to lean in closer, their silence almost cruel. The rustle of leaves above, the occasional creak of branches under his shifting weight, the damp smell of earth. It all pressed against me, amplifying my isolation. It wasn't just him up there trembling, it was me too. Trembling in the open, my hands useless, my heart cracking with every sound he made. I sank to the base of the oak, mud soaking into my jeans, head tilted back, eyes locked on him. He looked smaller from here, more fragile. His chest fluttered with each breath, his body shrinking into itself as though fear had folded him in half. I whispered again, softer this time, almost to myself. "I don't know how to help you." The admission broke something in me. The weight of helplessness wasn't just about him. It was about every moment I'd ever stood by, unable to change what needed changing. Every memory of watching someone I loved suffer, knowing my words weren't enough. Every night when the silence pressed too heavy and I'd had no way to fight it. All of it came pouring back through this one impossible scene, a dog in a tree, and me on the ground, praying for strength I didn't have. I buried my face in my hands, breathing hard, mud streaking my skin as my palms pressed against my eyes. For a moment, the urge to walk away whispered cruelly, to let nature decide, to absolve myself by calling it impossible. But when I looked up again, his eyes were still on me, wide, glassy, filled with fear and a trust that shattered me. He believed I would not leave, and that belief was heavier than my helplessness. So I stayed. Kneeling in the mud, spine pressed to the oak, heart breaking in the quiet intervals between his cries, I stayed. I didn't know how, I didn't know when, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty: I would not walk away. And as I sat there, fists clenched, breath raw, I heard something new in the distance. Not the bark of a dog, not the sigh of the wind, but the faint murmur of voices. At first, I thought the sound was my imagination, the woods playing tricks with echoes, or my mind inventing what it wanted most. But it grew clearer, rising and falling against the hush of branches' voices. Human voices, they were faint, carried by the wind. The kind of sound you strain for when you're desperate for company. I shot upright, mud clinging to my knees, heart pounding not with fear now, but with something close to relief. "Over here!" I shouted, my voice cracking. The dog barked at the sudden burst of sound, his body shifting dangerously in the fork of the branches. I steadied my own breathing, whispering an apology upward, then cupped my hands around my mouth.
"Air! Please, someone, this way!"
The voices paused, then sharpened. Leaves rustled in the undergrowth. Footsteps. Moments later, two figures broke through the trees. A man and a woman, both dressed in rain-streaked jackets, carrying the kind of curiosity you bring on a walk through damp woods. The woman's face changed first, confusion melting into shock as her eyes tilted upward. "Oh my God," she gasped, hand flying to her mouth. Is that a dog?" The man followed her gaze, his brows knitting. How in the hell? He didn't finish. The absurdity of the scene didn't allow it. The dog barked again, weak but desperate, and the sound rooted us all in the same shared disbelief. "Yes," I said, my voice shaking with the weight of hours spent alone. "He's been up there for I don't know how long. I can't get him down." For a beat, none of us moved. We just stood there, 3 humans staring up at the trembling body of an animal suspended where no animal should ever be. Then the man shook his head, as if trying to make sense of it, and dropped his backpack to the ground. "All right," he muttered, more to himself than to us. "We'll figure this out." The woman crouched near me, eyes darting from the dog to the slick bark of the trunk. She placed a hand on my arm, grounding me in the chaos. "You've been here the whole time?" I nodded, throat tightening. "He won't last much longer." Her expression softened, as if she understood more than I'd said. She looked up at the dog again, her lips pressed thin, and whispered, "We're not leaving you, sweetheart." The man was already pacing around the base of the tree, scanning the limbs like a strategist before battle. "We need height," he said. "A ladder, rope, something." His eyes fell on the forest floor, littered with fallen branches, some thick, some slender. He grabbed one and tested its weight, as though imagining it as a tool. But the oak loomed too tall, too proud to be conquered by scavenged wood. He tossed it aside, frustration carving into his face. Others arrived not long after, voices carrying from the trail, drawn like moths to the strange beacon of barking. A boy with a bicycle, 2 older women carrying umbrellas, another man with a dog on a leash who immediately began howling at the treed animal in strange kinship. Within half an hour, what had been a private agony transformed into a gathering. Strangers stood shoulder to shoulder at the base of the oak, craning necks, murmuring disbelief. Some clutched phones, debating whether fire services would respond. Others tried to soothe the dog with gentle whistles and calls. Each person's presence shifted the air. Where I had sat drowning in silence and helplessness, now there was movement, energy, determination. And yet, the helplessness still hovered like a shadow, because for all our numbers, the problem remained towering above us. One man tried first, fueled by courage. He stripped off his jacket, rubbed his palms against his jeans, and began clawing at the trunk. His muscles strained, shoes scrabbling, but after just a few feet his grip slipped and he fell back, landing with a grunt. The crowd winced. The dog barked, startled again, his body quivering harder.
"Careful!" someone shouted. "You'll scare him worse."
Another woman fetched a length of rope from her car, which she'd parked at the trail's edge. They tossed it upward again and again, hoping to catch a branch, but the limbs swayed out of reach, defiant. The rope fell back each time, limp, useless. Every failed attempt deepened the weight pressing against my chest, reminding me how close we teetered to disaster. But it was not despair that filled me now. It was awe. Awe at the way people had come, people who owed nothing to me, nothing to this dog. Yet still they stood in the mud with faces lifted, willing to try. Their voices braided into a tapestry of effort, suggestions, encouragements, murmured prayers. A community, stitched together by crisis, refusing to let one life slip quietly away. The dog's eyes roamed over the crowd, glassy, bewildered, but locked most often on me. It was as though he recognized me as the first pair of eyes that hadn't left him. The first voice that promised something beyond fear. That look cut through every layer of exhaustion I carried. I straightened, shoulders squaring, no longer alone in the impossible. As the afternoon deepened, the light began to shift. The canopy filtered what little sun pressed through the clouds, casting us all in a bruised, amber haze. Shadows stretched across the forest floor, and with each degree of fading light, urgency grew sharper. The man who tried climbing shook his head. "We don't have much time before it's too dark to see." The words hit like stones. Darkness would turn the branches invisible, his trembling invisible, his fall inevitable. And then Itak moved, one paw shifting too far, his body lurching forward with a sound that made every throat below gasp. His hind legs scrambled, claws scratching, body dangling dangerously in open air. A collective cry rose from the group, like a choir of panic. Hands shot upward instinctively, useless against gravity but unwilling to remain idle. I heard someone whisper, "Oh God." Another said, "Catch him." The dog's body flailed, chest heaving, eyes wide with terror. For a suspended moment it felt like the world held its breath. And it was then, in that fragile silence, that one voice cut through, the woman who had placed her hand on my arm earlier. Strong, steady, unwavering. "Hold on, sweetheart. We're here. We're not letting you go." Her words rang like a vow, like the spine of everything we had become, strangers turned into saviors, hands reaching upward, refusing to let fear win. The dog slipped again. It was not the small, cautious shuffle of paws I had watched a dozen times before, but a violent lurch, his entire body pitching forward into space. His claws tore desperate lines down the bark, shrieks of sound that made every muscle in me lock. For one unbearable second, he hung there, legs flailing, the whites of his eyes flashing, his chest heaving against the invisible pull of gravity. And then he let out a sound, half bark, half scream, that pierced the crowd like a blade. Time did not slow, it shattered. Every heartbeat felt detached from the last, every gasp from the people below a separate echo, as though the world had splintered into frames of a film flickering too fast. His body dangled, his hindquarters swinging loose, his front claws barely snagging a lip of bark slick with moisture. I heard someone behind me sob. Another voice shouted, "He's falling!" A man cursed under his breath. The rope lay useless at our feet, the ladder we wished for only a ghost in our minds. And there he was, seconds from plummeting. I stumbled forward without thinking, arms reaching upward, though I knew he was still 20 feet above me. My palms were open, trembling absurd against the scale of distance. I whispered a prayer, maybe for him, maybe for myself, words tumbling without form. Please, please, please. The branch groaned under his shifting weight. His claws slipped one by one, his body sliding lower, until only one paw clung desperately, the other three dangling in open air. His ribs expanded in frantic gasps, every muscle in his body screaming with the effort of not letting go. And then, movement. The man who had tried climbing earlier launched forward, a sudden surge of reckless courage. He had found a smaller tree just beside the oak, one that angled close enough to the lower branches. Without hesitation, he scrambled up, his hands gripping bark, his shoes slipping but never stopping. The crowd erupted in shouts, some urging caution, others shouting encouragement. My own voice cracked raw from my throat. Hurry. He climbed higher, closer, until the branch he reached bent under his weight. The dog's claws lost their grip entirely, his body slipping into nothingness. When the man lunged, stretching one arm outward, fingers grasping in blind desperation, the moment stilled into something sacred. The dog's body plummeted an inch, maybe two, but then it jerked, suspended again. The man had him, his hand clutched a fistful of muddy fur, grip white-knuckled, face contorted with effort. Gasps broke into cries of relief, voices trembling in disbelief. But it was not over. The man strained, trying to pull the dog closer, but the animal thrashed in panic, hind legs kicking against open air. His weight dragged the man sideways, threatening to topple him. The crowd's relief turned to horror again, shouts colliding like crashing waves. "Hold him! Don't let go! Oh God, please!" The man grunted, teeth clenched, muscles trembling. "I've got you," he whispered to the dog, though I don't know if it was meant for the animal or himself. His voice carried down through the branches like a vow. His other hand scrambled, finding purchase on the bark, and with a roar of effort he hauled the dog upward, inch by inch, until the trembling body collapsed against him. The woods erupted in sound, cheers, sobs, prayers whispered into open palms. My knees buckled, relief slamming through me like a tidal wave. I pressed both hands to my mouth, eyes burning, as the sight fixed itself in me, a man clinging to a tree, a dog cradled against his chest, life snatched back from the brink of death. The dog trembled violently, mud and leaves smeared into his fur, his body curled tight like a child pressed against safety. His eyes were still wide, glazed with terror, but his chest rose with air he might never have tasted again if not for that grasp. The man clung to the tree, his own breath ragged, sweat and rain streaking his face. He shouted down, voice breaking, "I've got him! I've got him!" The crowd cheered again, the sound shaking the branches themselves. Strangers hugged one another, hands clasped in disbelief, some sinking to their knees as though they'd just witnessed a miracle. But the descent still loomed. Carefully, slowly, with every eye pinned upward, the man inched back down the angled tree, one arm wrapped around the dog's body. Each shift of his weight made the branches creak. Each slip drew gasps from below. I moved beneath him, arms outstretched again. Not useless this time, but ready. Others pressed in beside me, palms lifted, forming a circle of waiting hands. Step by step, foot by foot, he descended until his shoes touched lower branches, until at last, with one final drop, he lowered the trembling animal into our arms. The dog collapsed against me, his body shaking so violently it rattled through my bones. His fur was damp, sticky with mud, his heart a hummingbird's flutter against my chest. He buried his face against my jacket, as though the darkness of fabric was safer than the wide, terrifying sky. My own arms wrapped around him instinctively, protective, disbelieving. The crowd closed in, not crushing but encircling, voices soft now, reverent. A hush had fallen in the wake of triumph, as though no one wished to scare him further, as though we all recognized we were holding something too fragile for noise. I looked up at the man still in the tree, his chest heaving, his face etched with exhaustion and relief. Our eyes met, and I mouthed the only words that felt worthy. "Thank you." He nodded, his expression crumbling into something raw, vulnerable. He climbed the rest of the way down, his legs trembling when he hit the ground. And when he stood among us, mud streaked across his clothes. Strangers reached out, clapping his shoulder, gripping his arms, thanking him through tears. But my focus was only on the life in my arms. The dog's eyes finally blinked, slow, heavy, no longer wild with panic but heavy with exhaustion. His breathing softened, his body melting deeper into my chest. The tremors still shook him, but less now, as though he was learning he was safe. And in that moment, I realized the miracle wasn't just that he hadn't fallen. It was that, in the span of an afternoon, strangers had woven themselves into a net strong enough to catch him. Hands had reached upward, and for once impossibility had bent. The fall never came. The world after a storm always feels different. Not just quieter, but changed, as though the air itself remembers what it endured. That evening, when the last crowd had thinned and the echoes of frantic voices faded into silence, I sat on the damp grass with the dog pressed against my side. His fur, still damp from mud and sweat, carried the earthy scent of leaves and bark. My hands moved gently through the tangles, as though combing away not just dirt but the terror still lingering in him. His eyes, soft now, were no longer wide with panic. They blinked up at me, slow and heavy, lidded, pools of amber lit with fatigue. There was something in them that had not been there before, or maybe something I hadn't noticed until survival pulled it into the light trust. Fragile, tentative, but alive. Around us, the woods bore the scars of the day. Bark scraped raw where claws had fought gravity. Branches bent under the memory of weight they weren't meant to carry. Footprints stamped the mud in frantic circles, each one a trace of human desperation. And yet, despite the wreckage, there was peace. The tree stood tall, roots gripping the earth, leaves whispering with the evening wind as though to say life holds on. The man who had saved him sat across from me, elbows on his knees, face streaked with dried sweat. He hadn't said much since climbing down, and he didn't need to. Our silence was not empty, it was full. Every glance, every exhale was its own language, one born of shared survival. I wanted to ask him why he'd risked himself, what force had propelled him into the branches when fear could have kept him grounded. But then I realized I didn't need his answer. Sometimes the reason was as simple as this: life calls, and someone answers. The dog leaned harder against me, pressing his weight until I had no choice but to cradle him as though he were still dangling in danger. His chest rose and fell, steadier now. Every breath a rhythm that pulled me deeper into calm. He was safe. That was enough. And yet, even in the relief, there was a shadow of the what-if. Every image of his slipping paws replayed in my mind, each one a reminder of how thin the thread had been. How many times had we come within a heartbeat of watching him shatter against the ground? That he didn't. That was the miracle. A child from the crowd, one who had stayed behind with her parents, approached timidly. Her small hands reached toward the dog, stopping short as if afraid of breaking him. I nodded gently. "It's okay," I whispered, more to her than to him. She touched his fur, her face breaking into a smile so pure it pierced me. The dog lifted his head, sniffed her fingers, and let out a sigh, as though even he knew life continues. As dusk fell, the crowd dispersed completely. Some left murmuring about what they had witnessed, their voices carrying awe, as if they had been given a story they would tell for the rest of their lives. Others left quietly, tears wiped from faces, carrying with them a piece of the miracle. And soon it was just the three of us. The man, the dog, and me, alone beneath the tree that had been both a prison and a stage for salvation. I thought about roots and wings then. How roots hold us, keep us steady, tethered to something solid. How wings, whether made of feather or courage, are what lift us when falling seems certain. This dog had no wings, yet he flew, not by his own strength, but on the unseen wings of strangers' hands, voices, prayers. The man finally stood, brushing mud from his jeans. "He's yours now," he said softly, his voice hoarse. "I chose you." I looked at the dog, who had pressed his paw against my leg as if anchoring me. My throat tightened. "I don't know if I'm ready for that," I whispered, though even as I said it, I knew the truth. I was already his. The man gave me a tired smile, nodded once, and walked away into the fading light. He didn't look back. Some heroes don't need recognition. They just need to know they answered when life called. The dog and I stayed until the stars began to pierce the sky. I listened to the night sounds, the rustle of leaves, the distant chirp of crickets, the soft whistle of the breeze. Everything felt sharper, more alive, as though the world had been washed clean by the miracle of one small life saved. When I finally stood, the dog followed, his legs wobbly but determined. He stayed close, pressing his body against mine, tethered now not by fear but by choice. And as we walked away from the tree, I realized something profoundly. He had not been the only one rescued that day. Because in watching him cling to life, in watching strangers risk themselves for a heartbeat of hope, something in me had been pulled back from the edge too. I had been reminded that even when we teeter on the brink, even when gravity feels inevitable, hands can rise, voices can join, and wings can appear where none existed before. We reached the road, the glow of street lamps stretching long across the pavement. The dog stopped, turned once, and looked back at the tree. His ears flicked, his tail gave the faintest tremor. And then he faced forward again, as if to say, "The past held me, but the future carries me now." I smiled through tears, tightening my grip on the leash I hadn't even realized I was holding yet. Together, we stepped forward, roots behind us, wings beneath us, into whatever came next. And as the night wrapped around us, I knew this truth with a clarity so sharp it cut. The fall never came. Because love caught him first,